From the American College of Financial Services, welcome to Annuity Insights, in partnership with New York Life.
Hello and welcome everyone to the Annuity Insights podcast. I'm Michael Finke. I'm a professor of wealth management at the American College of Financial Services, and I'm joined here today by two very special guests. The first is Jean Chatzky. Jean is host of the HerMoney podcast and an education fellow at the Alliance for Lifetime Income, and also by Matt Wion. Matt is the head of retail annuities at New York Life. And we're here to discuss the use of annuities by consumers. And I know, Jean, you have a very large podcast. You speak to a lot of women about retirement income planning. Tell me, what do you see as the major hesitancy to use an annuity?
Thanks for having me, Michael. I think the hesitancy is largely historic. Annuities have had a reputation in the past as being overly complicated, overly expensive, lots of fees. There have been a lot of naysayers in the press that have people worried that the minute they step into a product like this, they're going to essentially get ripped off. Now, that is definitely changing. Over the past 5-6 years, I think we've seen a greater acceptance of people, as the products have simplified, willing to use them for what they need. And at least my audience, and my audience is a educated, affluent, mass affluent crowd of women, see these as very useful tools for making sure that in combination with Social Security, they are covering their fixed expenses in retirement for as long as they live. And that for as long as they live part is really, really important, because that's where the fear lies.
And I think the fear is very often the fear of running out of money. And my own research shows that retirees who have a pension spend substantially more than retirees who simply have savings. And I know I do a lot of work with a large financial company that does use very simple annuities to provide that base of lifetime income. And philosophically, the belief is that you have a budget, right, in retirement, and you have your inflexible expenses and you have your flexible expenses. And with those inflexible expenses, why not essentially buy yourself a lifetime stream of income so that you can feel comfortable spending the money without that fear of running out? And in fact, in economics, it is rational for a retiree to buy an annuity. And Matt, we have what's known as the annuity puzzle in economics, and that is that it is mathematically efficient to buy an annuity with a portion of your savings. And I think the best way to think about it is to buy it with the bond portion of your retirement savings, which most target date funds end up at about 70% bond. So you've got a lot of flexibility there with the bond portion of your savings to buy yourself a lifetime income. Why do you think it is that more Americans don't buy annuities?
Well, again, also thank you for having me today. I think it starts with some of what Jean alluded to, which is some of the misunderstanding or lack of education. First of all, I think that is improving. I think it's improving both because the industry has provided more information to consumers in the value of annuities. It's also changing because I think financial professionals have embraced annuities in financial planning. And a big part of that is the job of a financial professional is to think about the holistic needs of the client. And to your point, we've done a lot of quantitative research, or there's been a lot of quantitative research that helps articulate how an annuity can add value in an overall portfolio. And it gets to the point that Jean raised, which is providing guaranteed income, and that you mentioned, which is having that paycheck for life, which used to be provided by employer pension plans. We know those have sort of gone by the wayside for the most part. So annuities can help fill that gap. But the other benefit, and I know you're both aware of this, is that confidence and that peace of mind that having the guaranteed income stream provides to then either invest the portion of your nest egg that's not in an annuity to maximize growth or to spend freely in retirement.
Now, Gene, why do you think it is that annuities might be particularly valuable for women? What is it about the situation of your average listener that makes annuities seem like a particularly appealing solution? And frankly, it is a bit of an issue that more people are not willing to at least consider the purchase of an annuity.
When you think about the life cycle of a couple, what tends to happen is that the couple ages together. They hopefully retire together. The man perhaps gets ill earlier than the woman. She takes care of him. He dies. She goes on to live for many more years and has to make sure that she's got a base of money that continues to come in to take care of her. And I'm not saying that you want annuities to cover all of your long-term care expenses, but when you think about, and it's true of women who are not coupled as well, the longer lifespan of a woman, it's those later years where you start worrying that you're going to exhaust the pool of money that maybe you were thinking about you could just use 4% of for 30 years. I think more and more people and more women are afraid that they are going to just hit 90, hit 95, keep on going, and those healthcare expenses are going to accelerate. They're going to need money in order to pay for that and to give them some choice in how they fund their own care.
Yeah, I think what the data shows is that we continue to see, although this is narrowing, a difference in average age among retirees between men and women. In a opposite sex couple, the man tends to be a few years older. Men die a little sooner than women do. It's about 1 to 2 years among higher income couples. It actually widens for lower income couples. And then one of the phenomenon that we also see in the research is that usually one spouse is the primary financial decision maker. And if that primary financial decision maker is the man, then part of the retirement planning process needs to be considering what happens after he's gone.
Yeah, I mean, I had somewhat outrageous example of this recently, which was that a man who knew that his wife was a huge spender was very concerned about what would happen after he passed away. His health was not good. He'd had diabetes for a long time. He intentionally put a great portion of their money into annuities because he knew that she would not be able to overspend through that money, that it would just keep on coming. And I got to say, she's in her 80s now. He's been gone for a while. It saved her because she did blow through everything else.
You know, I did an interview with retirees about 7 or 8 years ago for a financial company, and I asked them to bring me couples that had bought an annuity sometime over the last 10 years and just asked them why they bought the annuity and how it had affected their retirement. And one of the things I saw was that, first of all, nobody regretted it. Everybody was grateful that they had this stream of income that allowed them to budget more easily in retirement. And the reality is that you do experience cognitive decline over time, and you know it can serve as that sort of commitment device early on in retirement. But later on in retirement, essentially, it is good that you have this continued income stream because, first of all, it provides guidance about how much you can safely spend. The other thing is that it prevents you, it provides insurance against that possibility of running out if you tend to overspend. And I actually had two couples where I had one spouse tell me that they bought the annuity because they didn't trust their spouse to manage the money after they were gone. And in each case, it was a woman who was the primary financial decision maker who didn't trust her husband to manage the money after she was gone. And in each case, the husband was there and actually nodded their head and said, yes, no, I shouldn't be trusted with the money. But the reality is that retirement planning isn't just about the primary financial decision, it's about both spouses. And if there is a spouse that was not primarily responsible for making the investment decisions and deciding how much they could safely pull out of the account every month, then the annuity essentially provides insurance that there will always be a stream of income on top of Social Security. The other thing I mentioned before, Matt, is that one of the benefits of annuities is that it does provide a guideline about spending. And in the absence of that guideline, oftentimes people don't spend enough. Is that a problem, do you think?
I do think so, in part because it kind of flies in the face of what people are trying to do in retirement, which is enjoy their retirement. So you spend all of these years accumulating assets and accumulating savings. But if your primary mindset in retirement is to protect against uncertainty, uncertain healthcare costs, or or that uncertainty that goes with outliving your assets, as you talked about, then are you really sort of maximizing that retirement objective, so to speak? I think what an annuity can do is actually help provide that certainty. It takes some of those aspects of uncertainty off the table by providing that guaranteed income. And it's interesting, you hit with some of your examples on the couples that come in to talk about the reasons they might buy an annuity and some of that ensuring their spouse has that guaranteed income going on. I think that's helpful in starting to get at this, like why folks aren't interested as much in annuity. There's sometimes misperceptions about, well, what happens when I die? But annuities can be structured that payments continue on to a spouse and are structured that way, or even there could be a legacy if you haven't received all of your original premium when you're in retirement and you die early, which is one of the fears with an annuity. Well, you could have either the payment continue on or you could have a legacy death benefit. But taking some of that uncertainty off the table and then allowing you to spend a little bit more freely in retirement and hopefully enjoy what is your objective in retirement is one of the key benefits I see in terms of that peace of mind and that psychological benefit beyond the quantitative benefits.
I think you're so right. I mean, how often have we heard about people who don't want to spend their principal, right? My mother was one of these. We lost her about a year ago, but she was so excited that she had the same amount of money in her retirement account when she was close to death as she did when she entered retirement, which was 20 years earlier. And, she and my father lived very nicely. But I sometimes think about they could have taken more trips. They could have done, they could have done things that brought them happiness, that brought them joy. And it's sad for me that maybe they didn't because they wanted to hold on to that principle so much.
As the baby boomer retirement wave crests, it's time to position yourself as the ideal partner for this growing pool of clients with the American College of Financial Services Retirement Income Certified Professional designation. As an RICP, you'll get the specialized knowledge to help more clients with complex retirement planning needs. With the convenience and flexibility of the latest in e-learning design, the RICP delivers applied knowledge from over 45 retirement experts on Social Security, taxation, income planning, Medicare and Medicaid, long-term care planning, and more. Get started in our 3-course program today and become an RICP in 12 months or less. Now is the time to strengthen your client relationships with deep expertise to address the unique challenges of retirement. See how you can expand your opportunities at theamericancollege.edu/RICP.
If you are enjoying this content, please check out the New York Life Annuities Education Center, designed to support you in growing your annuity business with the tools, insights, and resources you need. Visit the Advisor Education Center at NewYorkLifeAnnuities.com.
Gene, I have been a big fan of using what I like to call a goal-based process in retirement income planning. And number one, I think the first conversation that an advisor can have with a client is, what do they want to do with the money that they've accumulated? So they have this nest egg, and part of the nest egg they can pass on after they're gone. But the rest of it, what's the goal of that money? Well, the goal of that money should be to live well, to spend the money. So, it's as long as you have a deliberate process where you say early on, I'm gonna carve off this chunk, and maybe it's the home equity, maybe it is life insurance, but you carve off this part and you say, all right, this is the part I'm gonna either pass on after I'm gone, or maybe in worst case scenario, I use it to cover some nursing home expenses, and then the rest of it I'm going to spend. But I think very often what happens is people really put their arms around that nest egg and they don't want to see it get smaller. And I very often see, planning mistakes like, I'm just going to spend the interest, or one of the biggest planning mistakes I see is, I'm just going to spend dividends. People try to imagine that stock dividends are equivalent to lifetime income, which the reality is they're not. They're just a forced sale of a portion of your stock investments. And you can end up with these situations where clients have very tax inefficient or undiversified portfolios, and they're not protected. They're not protected against that risk of loss. I mean, stocks are risky. They can lose money. So do you think that a goal-based process, Matt, I'm going to ask you this, do you think a goal-based process is useful to help clients do a better job of framing what the purpose of that money is?
I do. I mean, very simply put, it just helps you define, by using a goal-based process, it helps you define your needs. And then you can articulate with your financial professional, where are the gaps in those needs? I do think it's important in this instance, when you're developing a holistic plan, I do advocate working with a financial professional. I think they can help you then understand where an annuity fits into that strategy, and really bring to life the concepts that we're all talking about in this discussion. But a goal-based process hopefully brings to life those objectives. Even our own research mirrors what you just said, Michael, which is, when asked how people, like, what the goal is in retirement, often you'll hear, I want to travel, or I want to spend time with family that lives out of state, and those sorts of things. But then when you look at the actual behavior, they're not doing that. They're living off the interest, they're living off the income. By defining those goals, talking about some of these financial products and financial solutions that can help them meet those goals, including annuities, you're better aligning and preparing, frankly, for those outcomes in retirement.
Now, Gene, I know that you've had this conversation online with people who are skeptical about the use of annuities. Talk to me about what sort of language you use to be able to explain why it is that you might want to consider the use of an annuity.
Honestly, Michael, I cite your research. I mean, I talk about I talk about the difference between assets and income, and that they feel very, very different. That once we are used to receiving a paycheck, and we've gone through 40 years of receiving a paycheck and shoving money into our 401ks and our other retirement accounts, it's really hard to flip the switch and start pulling money out of those retirement accounts. That if you can keep receiving that paycheck, the research shows, your research, yours and David Blanchett's, shows that it is much easier to keep yourself on a budget, feel good about what you're spending, not worry that there's no more where that came from, not stay up at night worrying about the ups and downs of the market, and that you're going to get hit with a down year in the first couple of years of your retirement, and that's going to hurt you forever. I talk about it that way, but the basis is yours.
Well, Gene, I'm doing some research right now, which I think is really fascinating, because I think oftentimes when advisors present the use of an annuity, I think what's happening is they're becoming increasingly sophisticated at recognizing what kind of messaging resonates with the client. And I think the ability to budget, the ability to know that the money is not going to run out. And some of the research I'm doing is showing that it is, in many cases, the more optimistic retirees Well, the ones who think that they're going to live into their 80s and 90s, one of the messages that resonate with them is that it allows them to spend more while they're young. So when they can really enjoy it the most, when they're healthiest, when they're cognitively able to enjoy travel, it's not as challenging for them. I know instances where once you hit your 80s, it can actually be a little bit less enjoyable to travel because it's really a challenge to be able to do that. But when you're in your 60s and 70s, you can really enjoy it. And to know that the money is not going to run out if you spend it today, then I think that gives people the freedom to be able to spend the money early on to actually live better when they can enjoy the money the most because they know it's not going to run out.
So are you finding that it's the more optimistic people then who are more interested in the annuity?
I am. And what is so interesting is that I feel like annuities are very often framed as a poverty avoidance and, with a more negative type of framing, when in fact it is the positive framing that seems to resonate more. And it's those type of retirees that are more attracted to it. I think it's a good switch, I think, for the industry to focus from a more negative framing to a more positive framing, because that actually might attract more people to the use of an annuity. So
Fascinating. Can't
it
wait.
is. It's so much fun to do the research. So Matt, you've talked to a lot of advisors and wholesalers about the ways that advisors can help overcome this resistance to using their savings to buy an annuity. I mean, that's oftentimes difficult to take money because very often you frame on that dollar amount. And let's say I've saved $1 million.
Right.
Using, say, $300,000 of that to buy myself an income of a couple $1,000s per month, that can be very difficult for a retiree. How do you overcome that resistance?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think something that we see opportunity here, quite frankly. And the opportunity is to reframe it a bit. Like, from my perspective, leading with the product isn't the way to go about it. It really is starting with that goal-based, holistic planning advice and guidance, where in this situation, you're looking at the situation of the client, the consumer, their family, their needs, near term, long term. And by defining what their assets are today, what those needs are, then you can start to articulate, well, gee, would you benefit from having, say, for example, a paycheck for life? How much do you think you need? Would you need? What are those fixed expenses you're trying to take, cover with some certainty? Okay, by the way, we have this product that if you took 300,000 of your million, that takes it off the table. That still leaves you $700,000. Now, for us to talk about what do you want to do with that in retirement? We could keep it invested and continue to grow, but you wanted to take that trip. Now you've taken some uncertainty off the table, and we can turn the conversation, sort of leaning on your point, to a more positive tone of let's talk about what the opportunities are with that other money. So starting with needs and where the gaps are, and then using financial products like annuities that provide guarantees where you're transferring sort of some of that risk of outliving your assets. Instead of self-insuring that as a client, transfer that to the insurance company. Yes, you have to pay them a premium or the 300,000 of assets in your example, but there's value there that you're getting. And that value is not just that income payment, the numbers, so to speak. It's that peace of mind and that confidence with what you can do with the other 700,000.
Oh, Gene, I think this concept of a paycheck for life, that might resonate with you.
Just a little bit. I'm working on a book, Matt, called The Forever Paycheck. It'll be out in the fall of 2026. But not to hijack your podcast, Michael, but I have a question for Matt. How do you convince the advisors who work on an assets under management model to add these products to their menu? Because honestly, I've encountered resistance with my own advisor.
It's a great question, and frankly, it's one that we continue to grapple with. I would actually relate my point of view there to the point of view for the client as well, which is from an advisor perspective, the goal is not to take all of the client's assets that they've accumulated and position it into an annuity. The goal is to sort of identify those needs, and if the optimal solution in terms of meeting that guaranteed income or the paycheck for life is an annuity, then the advisor can focus on how they want to then manage it. Maybe frees up them, frankly, to do some different things with the remaining assets. So one, it creates some opportunity for the advisor that maybe the client would be resistant to, and the advisor's having trouble convincing them because the client is saying to the advisor, gee, I want to, to the point of the example you raised earlier, like I want to make sure my $1 million is there 20 years from now too, if not even growing more. And that can be counterproductive for what the advisor is really good at doing. So as long as sort of the framing for the advisor mirrors that of the client, I think there's opportunity there as well.
Matt, I do a lot of research in this area, and it's been a source of frustration for me. I get a little bit cynical about it. I mean, one of the points I like to make to advisors is this is going to put less pressure on the remainder of your portfolio. You're going to withdraw less money from that portfolio to fund the lifestyle later on in retirement. You can take a greater amount of investment risk. The client is more resistant to the risk because they know they have that guaranteed income. But frankly, that's a self-serving explanation for why you should recommend an annuity. And I think what I see is that companies that have adopted more of a salary type of compensation model, their annuity adoption is far more common among those types of advisors. And it does make me a little bit cynical, but I think this is one of those challenges that the industry is going to need to grasp. I mean, if you are truly a fiduciary, then you need to do what is in the best interest of the client and not necessarily what is going to result in the highest amount of compensation. And that creates a clear conflict oftentimes in retirement planning, because spending down the assets is really very often the goal of the client, but not necessarily the goal of the advisor. So Jean, what have you told your own advisor about this?
I've told him that I'm going to do it myself, honestly. And he gets that, right? He was like, you want to do this yourself? Go do it yourself. We're just not going to help you, basically.
But I think that's a risk for advisors. And I think that what I've seen is that advisors that follow a more integrated goal-based approach, they can pick off clients pretty easily. Because that's what clients want. Like that, when you do surveys, what you find over and over again is they just want to know how much they can safely spend in retirement. They don't want to know whether or not they're going to be able to get, a slightly higher return on their investment portfolio so they can grow more over time. They just want to know how much they can actually spend.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm annoyed, right? I mean, this is annoying. Not annoying enough to leave, but definitely a check in the annoying column.
I'm not sure it's appropriate for the podcast, but I know some advisors that'd be willing to help you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I haven't been watching this podcast. Matt, Jean, thank you so much. This was such a wonderful conversation. I appreciate your time. And thank you, everyone, for joining us for another episode of the Annuity Insights podcast.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Jean.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks for listening, and we hope you join us on future episodes. Annuity Insights is a production of the American College of Financial Services. Annuity Insights is produced and owned by the American College of Financial Services with generous support from New York Life Insurance Company. Accuracy of information is subject to change, taxes, legal, rates, etc., but believed accurate as of the time of recording, January through April 2025.